My father came from Greci in 1929. I'm Joe DioGuardi. I'm the oldest of Joe DioGuardi Sr.'s 3 children. I've got my brother Dick, he's 5 years younger. My sister Angela, we call her Angel. She's 3 years younger than I am, or 2 years younger. Ever since I was a young man being raised in the Bronx in what I knew as an Italian-American neighborhood, I always felt there was something special about the kind of Italian that I was, because I remember many times my father speaking a language to his mother, and in the presence of other Italians, where they would turn to each other and say, boy, they're really speaking that crazy dialect, Albanese. And I grew up thinking that I was from Italy, because I knew, or at least I was from a family that was from Italy, because I knew my father was born in a town near Naples, which we know as Greci, in the province of Avellino, and he was born there in 1913. He came to America in 1929. And my mother comes from a town on the east side of Italy, because Naples is on the west side, and it's a town that's just above Bari called Giovinazzo. So growing up in the Italian-American experience in America, I felt there was something different about my father's side of the family, because it had to do with the language. As I got older, I remember in the late 40s and 50s, before we get to me being too much older, as we went to picnics in Orchard Beach in the Bronx and Pelham Bay in the Bronx, inevitably my father would hear someone speaking his so-called dialect, and he'd go up and start chatting with them, and as soon as they started talking the Albanian language, which we now know as our Bresh, the old Albanian language which survives in Italy today in 51 Albanian-speaking villages in Italy today, they would grab each other, kiss each other, and I still have many recollections of how my father was so deliriously happy that he met people that spoke this old Albanian language, and their first words would be 2 Albanian words. My father would say, "Gjaku I shprishu," as he kissed them and hugged them. And Gjaku is the word for blood in Albanian, and shprishu means dispersed. The Albanian people have had a history, as we know, having done work in the Balkans since I was a congressman with my wife Shirley, of dispersal. They've been a people who have been chased out of their country by the Turks in the 15th century. And after 450 years of Ottoman occupation, World War I comes, and they still had problems with Greeks and Slavs, the Serbs, Macedonians, and then later on with communists. So that they've been a people who have been kept off balance for the last 600 years. But that word, Gjaku I shprishu, those 2 words meant a lot to me, because it showed me that my father was reaching out to his path, that he found the people from his town that, like himself, were again dispersed. And in 1929, my father's dispersal was as a result of economics, not political repression, because Italy did provide an asylum for the Albanian people since the year 1461, which is when they went to Greci, and then most Albanians came when the Turks overran Albania in 1488. So you're talking about some 600 years. But this dispersal was an economic one, because during the Great Depression, which hit Italy as well, maybe worse than the United States, there was no work, was no jobs. And I remember my father saying that his cousins, the females, 2 of them, had to be put in a convent because they had big families and they couldn't afford to feed these individuals. They were starving. And one of them ended up in America, and we know her today. She just died a few years ago, as Sister Cecilia Tosi. And Tosi is the name of my grandmother, Angelina Tosi. My grandfather was Nicola DioGuardi. And we'll talk about that later on today, because we're here in Canton to see their descendants. And why are they here? And why are we here? Well, it was about a year or 2 ago that I got a call from Betsy Sabaid. She is one of my 3rd cousins, She has Albanian heritage she'll talk about in a while, and we'll see her during the day. And she had seen an article in National Geographic when Shirley and I brought them to Italy to show them, and they were in disbelief that there were so many Albanians in Italy, because they wanted to focus on the Kosovo War in 1999, and they were thinking they'd cover the refugees that were coming from Kosovo to Italy, but didn't know there was an indigenous population of Albanians from 600 years ago. So that was the first outreach to me that connected us to Canton, because Betsy's family came to Canton before she moved to California. And then maybe a year later, I get an email from Bob Peterson, who is a Danish American who married one of my cousins, Dina, and we'll see her later on. And he did a great job in tracing the roots of the people from Greci back as many as 10, 11, 12 generations, 300 to 400 years, because being an expert in computers, he managed to put on a database all the birth and death records and marriage records from Greci, so we have it. And it was in talking to him, and he sends me a 13-page listing of my ancestors from Greci on my father's side, going back, 300 or 400 years, and I gave it to my brother Dick and my sister Angel, and that's where we began thinking that, we need to connect. Here we connected with the past on a piece of paper. Why don't we go and meet the cousins that we know are in Canton, Ohio? So we're here today. And why are there so many people from Greci and Canton, Ohio today? Well, as I said before, the people who came from Italy came here looking for jobs. And it's obvious talking to Dina and Betsy and Bob that the people here in Canton and other suburbs like Magnolia were attracted to companies that were making bricks, steel companies. And I guess when the first Albanians from Greci came here in the 1890s, they found a good livelihood, especially compared to what was there in Italy. And don't forget, where Greci is just an agricultural area, and the subsistence level was basically on growing food and selling it to the local Italians in the local villages. But when they came here, I guess they had a pretty good living, and they started to send that signal back to Greci. And sure enough, Bob told me that on the ships that they came on, he saw on the manifest that they were heading for Canton, not New York, so that they already knew this was their destination. In the beginning, I guess some found New York and heard about jobs and came out here. Well, over the years, many people from Greci ended up in the Canton area and the suburbs because of those jobs, and they've stayed here. And today, I'm told by Bob Peterson, there may be as many as 400 or 500 cousins, the Greci cousins, we'll call them, that are second, third, fourth, who knows. But we know by the names because the names are very prominent. The family names of Rex, of Pucci, of DioGuardi, of Sasso, even Regis Philbin's mother. And believe it or not, Regis Philbin's mother, Philomena Boschia, she wasn't born in Greci, but her father was, and she was born here just after they came to America. She was born in Manhattan, and we've now traced Regis Philbin's roots back to Greci some 300 years, and that's another story that's going to be told hopefully soon. But we have here now so many cousins with these names, and some of these names, believe it or not, go back 600 years. Don't forget, well, I haven't told you the original story of Greci, but it was basically settled by the soldiers of the great Albanian general, George Castriati, known as Skanderbeg, because he was invited to what was then the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily to help ward off the French who were invading the lower Italian peninsula. You have to remember that Italy didn't become a country until 1861. We're talking about 600 years ago when you had the Kingdom of Venice and Rome and everything else, and the Papal States. So here we have now the great general going back to defend his people against the Turks, but he leaves 2,000 soldiers in Greci. And the names of those 2,000 soldiers exist today. The Puccis, the Rexes, the Tosis, the Boschas, fact, I told Regis Philbin, you come from an Albanian captain from 600 years ago. And he just was mesmerized by the story and wants to hear more. And he'll see this tape as well. So here we are today in a reunion in Canton, Ohio, to meet our cousins. But I go back to those words that I told National Geographic, and they renamed their story Albanians, a people undone, which was their translation of Jako Ispriču, a people that was dispersed, that my father found on the picnic areas of Pelham Bay and Orchard Beach that we're finding here today. So the theme of this tape is Jako Ispriču, that we're finding our lost blood. We came here last night, we met with a few of the cousins. We're going to meet today with maybe 150 or 200. And Shirley, who's an expert in oral history, my wife Shirley Cloyes, she'll be interviewing some of the older members of the family in their 90s that still speak Albanian or Albrecht fluently, so we have that on tape as well. So with that, I have my brother here on my right side, and he's got a mic, so we'll start with him. I'm sure even at 5 years younger than me, he remembers how Dad was proud to meet Albanian people. And even when I became a congressman, how proud he was when he realized that he was now connecting to Albanians across the Adriatic that he never knew about, because he was raised in a village where they went only to the 4th or 5th grade, so they didn't hear the study. They didn't know the history of the Albanian people on the other side. And here, my becoming a congressman, being lobbied by Albanians who found my father by accident speaking Albanian, and that's how this thing came out. Here he's now connecting to Albanians across the Adriatic, and I hear him speaking Albanian to people from Yugoslavia. And that's when I knew this was not a dialect of Italian, that this was another language completely. It was the Albanian language, which hasn't changed much in 600 years. There have been some changes. But any recollections that you have on that, Rich?
Well, if I remember correctly, the story was at one of your campaigns in 1984. I remember Dad was there, and his sister Ida was there. And he was just in the background speaking with Aunt Ida. And he was speaking in the Gegida. We always called it Gegida, but that's Albrecht. And I think one of the Albanian people in the community heard him speaking with Aunt Ida, and he went up and he started to talk to Dad, and he asked, well, why are you here? And Dad said, well, Joe is my son. And when the Albanian in the audience heard that Joe DioGuardi running for Congress was his son, he couldn't believe it. And then I think all those community Albanians started to come to the future campaigns and kind of hooked on to you.
Came to my house to tell me about Kosovo.
And that was the beginning of, I think, you helping them out in their issues and problems they had in Europe. I always remember that story. And, as far as Dad, I remember my younger days working in a grocery store in the Bronx, and Dad had friends like Rocco Leone, and there was also another one, Leonard. I forget his last name, but Lenny was from also.
Yes, I forget that last name.
If not Greci, maybe Ariano.
Caraturo, Lenny Caraturo.
Caraturo. Yes. And so I have recollections of Dad's friends when I was working in the grocery store. But being the youngest, I didn't pick up too much on the language.
But you remember him speaking the language to Grandma?
All the time.
And what's the Albanian word for nose?
That nose is hunda.
Right. Okay, so
and bread is buka.
Right.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, I have Albanian clients today. I'm an accountant, and oftentimes I make a connection with, I know a couple of words, so they're amazed. I know what the word for nose and bread is.
You also know a couple of others too, but we're not going to say anything.
Exactly. That's right.
That was on your last video.
Well, Angel, you have, I'm sure, the same recollections, and you remember Grandma. In fact, you brought some pictures here, and we're going to take these pictures later, but here's my mother and father being married in the Bronx in 1939 in Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, and we were baptized in that Italian neighborhood church, which is now the Little Italy of the Bronx. We went to a neighboring school called St. Martin of Tours, but there's a picture of, and many of these people come from Greci. Okay, we'll take pictures later. And my sister was nice enough to bring the passport of my grandmother, Angelina Tosi, with one of her daughters here. And here it does say that she comes from Greci. And I think it says she's born in 1892.
1892.
So we will take a copy of this and put this in too. But this is the original passport from Angelina. as she was coming to America. And here is Angelina many years later in the Bronx Park. You can see how well dressed she is over here. But we'll take a lot of pictures and still shots later.
They took a lot of pride in their appearance.
They did, I
My
remember.
grandmother. One of my earliest recollections is we grew up in an Italian-American neighborhood, and most of my friends' grandparents spoke Italian. And every time they were around my grandmother or my dad, and they would be conversing, my grandmother and my father, my friends would say, "That doesn't sound like Italian." And I'd say, "Well, it is. It's a dialect of Italian." I mean, I had no clue that any of this Albanian connection existed. But later on, it was interesting to find it was not Italian at all, which my friends had known early on. And we all picked up a few words from...
In fact, I remember when we walked into, because we had apartments in the same apartment building on 2164 Prospect Avenue, where I was born, where we were raised until we moved to Westchester in 1957. And my Aunt Fanny, my father had 3 sisters, and the oldest was Philomena, Aunt Fanny. And my cousin Rose, her only child, a daughter, just a few years older than me, next door. So we'd go sometimes next door, and they'd be chattering away in Albanian, and as soon as we walked in, they probably didn't want us to hear.
That's because Joe
too
and my
much.
cousin Rose were very competitive, and they never wanted Joe to know what was going on with
Well,
Rose.
whatever it was, but I always remember these words, "Mustoi mizgir," which meant don't say anything. Mustoi, must means don't, thoi means talk, mizgir, nothing. And those words exist today because I've used this in the in Kosovo, and those are exactly the words you use today if you wanted to tell an Albanian, don't say anything, mustoi mizgir. And here, as a kid, I remember that because my grandmother and aunts used it. You remember that too?
I remember that.
Well, we had an upbringing that was very much European, and the 3 of us had responsibilities in the store. Dad had a grocery store, vegetable store in the Bronx. He worked very hard, and we helped him. But he returned it by making sure that we were well educated, and that's why we're here today. And in a way, we're paying something back to his heritage. Not only am I doing that with Shirley because of our human rights work, but we as a family are here today, and it wasn't easy for us to leave our families and the others that are going to be here today, especially from California. But we feel that we owe something to the Albanian people to tell this story and to get it out to other Albanians across the Adriatic today, that there are people in America that still are proud of their heritage, that they come from a village where people today in Canton, Ohio, are still speaking Albanian, some of the older people I talked about. So I think this is an important connection in a human sense. In an historical sense, it's important because the Albanian people have been buried by communism, have been buried by the history as told by their adversaries, the Greeks and the Slavs, and have been buried by the Ottoman occupation for 450 years. 600 years ago, all Albanians were Christian, mostly Catholic. All the names were like Latin names, DioGuardi, Boscia, Sasso. It was the 450 years that they were coerced into a new religion, and many of them are blessed by that new religion today. There's no problem with religion. 70% of the Albanian people in the Balkans profess the Islamic faith, and 30% are Christian, and about 2/3 of that Christian are Orthodox and 1/3 Catholic. And they're very at peace with themselves. They intermarry. So religion is not an issue. But I wanted to make sure that we told this story because today there are Americans and others around the world who don't know who the Albanian people are, and this will give them one more facet of this story. A good sign. A good sign in many ways. My father's name, DioGuardi. And then the Pucci family, the Rex and Sassos. But I know that in my family there are Pucci, Rexes going back, and certainly DioGuardi. Now what's interesting is they used a small G. On my father's birth certificate, this is the way the name is spelled, but yet my brother, sister, and I, and my brother Richard is here, my sister Angel, we use a capital G because in Catholic schools they changed it. So here the DioGuardis here are using the small G, and the ones in New York are using the big G. So there's a little bit of a difference, but it's the same family.
They changed it. They changed it to conform to the Italian spelling.
Come here. Lynn, come here.
They
now,
didn't realize that all Albanian names were originally Italian, Illyrian.
Put my name up there.
How you doing? It's not me. I don't
How are you?
Hey,
Hi.
we did.
How are you?
This is somebody that we know from New York because Len Salazzo lives in the same town, or close to the same town that me and Shirley live in today, in Ossining. And we met him a few years ago, and he's been helping us. We had our Albanian American Civic League office in this building, and it turns out that he comes from Greci, his family. His last name is Salazzo, and he came here this weekend to be with us to meet his cousins, which are also my cousins because the families intermix.
Yeah.
And you got here safe, I see.
Yes, we
Great.
did. We got here
Good.
about the same time your brother
Great.
got here.
Now, the interesting thing is that he speaks Albanian. We didn't have to come to Canton to find somebody, and we'd love to get you on tape right now speaking Albanian. So if I were to tell you, because I can't speak fluent Albanian, I know a few words, it's wonderful to be here. How would you respond to me in Albanian, even though I may not understand all of it?
I'm shumë hëre se jam këtu sot. Very happy that I'm here today. She understands.
Yes, so that's really good, because I know that's the same thing they would say today in the Balkans, believe it or not. They use the same language. And what else would you say in Albanian today that comes to your mind?
Ning mura paramorn, njera hami.
And what would that mean?
Shirley didn't get that.
Well,
I can't wait until we eat.
you have to remember too. There's a difference
Oh, ha is eat, yes.
Fresh and the Albanian that I'm used to hearing.
Right,
There's
exactly.
some differences.
Exactly, I know.
Yeah.
So I have to
Well,
study your
actually,
French a little more.
actually, he used the same words. Ha means eat.
Ha means
He
eat,
says ha me, and I didn't pick it up, but
Right.
it's good. But it's going to be an interesting day.
I hope so.
Were you with your
Great
cousins
meeting my
last night?
cousins, yeah, we spent the night with them. We stayed at my cousin's house.
Terrific.
Yeah, it was nice.
And their last names are Salazzo,
Corelli.
Morcarelli.
That's my grandmother, my mother's side.
Very good. And what names go back in your family from Greci besides Salazzo?
Inzel,
Enzel,
Grella,
Grella,
and Mercarelli.
Mercarelli. How about Sasso?
Sasso
Sasso.
in somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
And Rex too.
Rex.
Yeah.
Well,
Pucci.
all the same village, right? And here they are from Greci
All those years
in
on the same
Canton, Ohio.
mountaintop.
Why do you think they're all here in Canton? We were talking about that before, but why do you think that most of the people from Greci came to Canton?
I really don't know. I think, from what I understood, a lot of them moved to Wisconsin, and from Wisconsin they moved back to Ohio and New York. I don't know
Probably
why
for jobs. They were probably looking for jobs, and we heard something about brick factories in Magnolia and the steel factories.
Iron
So,
and steel. and
Yeah.
Right.
this
Yeah.
area.
Well, my cousin's father, my uncle Angelo,
Yeah.
worked in the Timken factory here. I think they made ball bearings.
right.
That's where he worked back in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, it's kind of a depressed place now. I guess all these factories moved out,
Yeah.
and so we've got a lot of retired people here.
The family's doing well, though.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to meet them.
Yeah. good.
Let's go in.
All right.
Okay.
Good enough.
I'm Nellie. Well, I want to tell my father's name.
Both, yes.
My father came to this country. His name was Ralph Sasso. But when we came to America, they said it was Ralph Ross. My father and mother, they're from Greci. They came Provincia di Avellino, Provincia di Puglia. And then they came to this country.
To go back to Greci, do you have any sense of why your uncle asked your father and mother to come to America? Do you know, was it jobs? Was it...
Yeah,
do you
the
have-
jobs.
The jobs?
My father was he was a boss of a bricklayer department.
Mm-hmm.
He hired all Italian people to work with him.
Now, did your parents and grandparents, did they ever tell you anything about their lives in Greci? Did you ever hear anything about what it was like for them to live there?
Oh, it was hard. It was hard. They raised everything. They didn't buy nothing. It was
Many of you I've met, and it's wonderful that we are cousins. We're cousins because of the DioGuardi name, the Rex name, the Pucci name, the Boscia name, and Tosi. My grandmother was Angelina Tosi. Now, what's unique about this group, and by the way, I'm happy that we're here on the 100th anniversary of Domenico. Where's Trish? Is she here? Coming to America. It's Domenico, your grandfather? Right. And we've kind of added on to that through Bob because he's been following the history, the genealogy of the people who come from Greci, and that's how we kind of met. And I never realized that my father's cousins were mainly here in the area of Canton, Ohio. This is the first time I've stepped foot in Canton, Ohio. And I know there's some suburbs like Magnolia. So I have to tell you that you are unique in at least one respect. This is the largest population of people descended from the small Albanian-speaking village of Greci, near Naples, about 40 miles away, in the province of Avellino. Those are your roots. Those are my roots. My father was born in Greci in 1913. He came to New York in 1929. I'm his oldest son. He only had a 4th grade education. He married my mother. She was from Italy. She had an 8th grade education, and they worked very hard, just like your parents did and grandparents did. And I'm pretty sure they came here because they found jobs. Don't forget, the people who left Italy, whether they had Albanian background or Italian background or both, left because they needed work. There was a depression there. And many started coming here in 1890. Well, I'm Joe DioGuardi, the oldest son of Joe Sr. DioGuardi and Grace. This is my brother, Dick. He's 5 years younger than I am. And my sister, Angela, we call her Angel. She's 2 years younger than I am. And we're born in the Bronx. We moved to Westchester County in 1957. And, you know, this is America. You can be who you want to be. And when we moved there, I didn't realize that 20 years later, I'd become the congressman representing Westchester County. And I did mainly because of my family. They worked very hard to make sure their oldest brother, Joe, would get to Congress, okay? Now, my wife, Shirley, Cloyes DioGuardi, is out there. And say hello, Shirley. She's kind of a scholar. She's a former publisher. And today, she's doing something very important because she has studied a new science called oral history. If you've heard of the Jewish Holocaust and Steven Spielberg, you'll know that he set up a foundation called the Shoah Foundation to get on tape the older Jewish people who escaped the Holocaust, but you have to do it in a very specific way. In the way you answer the questions, the way they're transcribed, the way you translate it from different languages, and then it's accepted as history throughout the world. Universities get it. We're doing this today for you in Canton. Shirley is interviewing people who speak the old Albanian language, and I know we've got a couple here that have done it already. How many speak Albanian or some Albanian words here? I know Libby does, right? Yeah. Libby? Okay. If you haven't been on tape with Shirley, please. We brought professionals with us with very elaborate cameras. The camera out there is a high-definition Sony camera. It's the newest there is. We're putting this on the most advanced technical stuff so we could send this throughout the world once we edit it. So we're putting Canton on the map as where the largest population of descendants from Albanian Italians are, and this will now go all over the world, okay? So if you speak Albanian, and even a few words, go over there and get on that tape, okay? So, with that, let me now, by the way, Bob and Dina have done a marvelous job. You know Bob and Dina, right? Now, you see what's on the wall there?
We had a lot of help.
That is a family tree. And he says I know you've had a lot of help, and we thank everybody for not only coming here, but helping to make this happen. It's not easy to leave on a day what you're doing. But look at that family tree. Those are the people who are here in Canton, and their descendants going back, how many generations?
There's 8 generations.
8 generations going back, so some in the 1700s. And it started, I see in the middle, is my great-great-grandfather, Liberato, and his wife, my great-great-grandmother, Rosaria Tosi. My grandmother was Angelina Tosi, and Liberato DioGuardi is the grandfather of my father. And in between, there was a Nicola. It was great-grandfather of my father. That's my great-grand. Who knows? You better look at the tree. It's big and long, and your name's on it someplace. So you can go there and see it. Now, let me see. How many people came from out of town to be here? Out of town. Out of state, right? Okay, good. Most of you are from Canton, right? And Magnolia? Great. This is wonderful. And Akron. Wonderful. Now, yes, Shirley.
Go there and be photographed by, I think, is Steve still here?
Yes, Steve.
Or
Steve. Yeah. She's here.
Because we'd like to put the generations, the photo and the living reality of people from Greci
Okay.
on this tape.
Now, you need Libby to come here to be interviewed?
Right now, we're in the middle and
Okay, why don't you do that? Then Libby, you're next, then your sister, okay? I think it's your sister, right?
Martha, yes.
Martha, right. Okay, we need John. Now, let me tell you what's coming. This is the beginning of something that you're going to find very interesting, and you're going to relate to it because it's your blood. You've heard about my daughter, Cara? All right. Cara, in 15 years, she's 35, has worked very hard to become a very successful singer-songwriter. She's now developing her own band. Her album comes out at the end of August nationwide, and she's on a primetime TV show called The One. Now, why do I say that to you? Well, I'm proud. She's my daughter, but you should be proud because she shares your blood. But there's something coming up here due to this man. I never realized that Regis Philbin was as Albanian as he is. I remember in 1988, as a congressman, doing a benefit with him, and somehow at the end of it, some Albanian waiter walked over to the table and said, Joe, thank you for what you're doing in Kosovo, blah, blah, blah. We know your father was Bresh from Italy, Greci. And then Regis turned to me, Joe, I'm Albanian too. I says, how are you Albanian, Regis? He's like, well, my mother comes from Greci. Greci? My father comes from Greci. So would you believe Regis Philbin's mother, Philomena Boscia, actually she was born here, but her father, Leonardo Boscia, was born in Greci. And we've now tracked his whole family tree because, and by the way, there were 3 Philomena Boscias born within 3 years of each other, and we had to be exactly precise. So we needed to go to Regis to find out where they moved when they came to Manhattan. Then he found the manifest on the ship that brought the father here, and we found the census in 1920 and 1930 in the exact building that Regis said his mother had lived, so then we knew he had his family. So he made the family tree, 13 pages. I sent it to Regis and got him all excited about his Greci roots. But what's really going to be interesting, because he said this a couple of times on his TV show, that he's Albanian, because some people had come on the show and said something to trigger it. But what I've had his producer do is now track my daughter Cara, because her new TV show is on Channel 7, and Regis is on Channel 7. And what we're trying to do is this fall, Regis will have Cara on, and they're going to talk about their roots from Greci. Okay? That's what's coming. So this is not going to end over here. We're going to put Greci on the map, and in the process, we'll put Canton on the map again. Maybe we'll get jobs over here.
How about retirement?
Hey, wait a minute. Your congressman is 80. He's Ralph Regular, wonderful guy. And I think he's going to retire. Maybe I got to take a president's here. Maybe it's my way back to Congress. Okay, now, we wanted to, let's see, what do I want to say next? Right, well, let me introduce Dick. Did you want to say a few words
You
about
said it all, Joe.
I said it all. Okay, we said it all. Well, listen, we are very proud to be here, and we had heard when we were kids in the Bronx, I remember my father saying that his cousins from Ohio, he never mentioned Canton, he says our cousins, the Pucci's and the Rexes from Ohio, are going to visit their relatives and friends in Boston, and they're stopping, and one of them was a football player. This is the early 50s, and it must be that guy, his name is Rex, or Pucci, I forget, Rex? Pucci, that was inducted, because he was a famous football player, I guess college football? Right, and he was just inducted. So I remember how proud they were to tell me that, and here I remember them coming to our apartment in the Bronx, meeting my cousins from Canton, Ohio, on their way to Boston. And that's the last time I made the connection with the Rexes or the Puccis till now. It's 50 years, more than 50 years ago. So it's wonderful that we did connect. We owe a lot to Bob and Dina and so many of you who have worked to make this happen. And now we'll keep this going. The tapes. Now here's Greci di Puglia, but now it's in Avellino, not Puglia, the province.
Campania.
Campania. Well, here's Greci right by Naples.
And this is Katundi.
Well, which one do you want to take? I'll take it over here.
No, that's
That's me right here. You want to get Flo? Here's my sister Flo. Here's my sister Flo. This is her right here. This is Flo. You want to break the camera?
That's me, okay. All right. Okay. Where's...
Let's go see. Find myself.
Steve, you're going to have to get down because you're blocking the shot.
You're in the way.
Obvious people standing up to sit down.
We're getting tired.
Hello, everybody. Don't walk around.
What has he been trying?
Say the name of your family on three. 1, 2, 3.
Now, how many DioGuardis are here? DioGuardis. Raise your hand if you have a DioGuardi in your family. Okay. Raise your hand if you have a Rex in your family. Raise your hand if you got a Pucci in the family. There's 2 of us. How about Tosi? Any Tosis here? I know I got a Tosi. Tosi again. Ticiana. We got them all. Boscia. Salazzo. Sasso. Garibaldi. Who's the oldest? All right, take a seat, everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, now this is Nettie. Your last name is Rex, right?
I was a Rex.
He was a Rex.
And I married an
Orlando.
Orlando.
I see. But going back in the family, you know the DioGuardi name? Any DioGuardis in the family?
Her mother is DioGuardi.
Your mother was You're our cousin.
Yes.
I'm Joe. This is my sister Angel and my brother Richard.
So nice to meet you. I know very few words, but ishti buku. That's what she thinks. She is so pretty.
Si vemi mira. That's important.
What else do you want to know?
Well,
Did
you? When I used to go into my grandmother and she didn't want us to hear what they were saying, she'd say "Mostoy mesgay."
Yes.
Yes. And when she wanted me to get out of the way, she would eek.
Wait a minute.
Ikate, get out of here.
Is this your mother?
Terrific. Terrific. Well, we have certainly found our cousins here, our blood. And as they said in Albanian, my father used to say when he met Albanians he didn't know, Jaku Isprishu, that we found our lost blood.
About George Kastriati, Skenderbeg, the great Albanian hero. Tell me what you learned.
Well, I can't tell you right offhand, but Bob showed me a lot of things in the book, you know. So he'd know more about that than I would know.
And you know that, you probably heard, I believe, that Greci is the only Albanian-speaking town in Italy that Skenderbeg ever came to.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh,
and
okay.
he left his troops there. King Alphonse of Naples gave him the town because he had defended Alphonse against the French. And at that point, Italy, as we know it today, hadn't been created. And then Skenderbeg went back to Albania to fight the Turks and never returned. He died there. But he left 2,000 troops behind. Many of them, you may be descended, probably are.
Probably,
from some
yeah.
of those original troops. And Joe DioGuardi is as well.
Right.
So this is a very exciting event today for me because there's a connection now. We're talking about hundreds of years of history.
Yeah.
And when Albanians from Albania came from Albania to Greci, and especially Greci and other places, they kept the language and culture of Albanians alive at a time when no one knew what would happen. Eventually, the Ottomans were, they fell in 1913 after the end of the Balkan Wars, and then the rest is history. And so this group of people from Greci then managed to come here. And this is probably the largest diaspora community of people from Greci in the world.
Furthermore, uvakim katundin and upagif grati and kindertjul and udeveta papa pratat atena. Who come the Kuchin and Embry is Antonetta Candela and Uharovachi is the Shoike and come Divasa near Nicoletta and near Carmelita. Okay, that's all true from the name. Bye.
I don't know where Nettie came from.
Right.
I was named after my grandmother, Rex.
Rex, your grandmother.
Yes, my grandmother in Greci.
Do you know, did they ever talk about their lives in Greci at all?
I guess they had a rough time.
They had a rough time.
Poor farmers.
Poor farmers.
Farmers.
Do just for the camera, say something to the people of Greci in Albanian because they're going to be listening to us speak.
Kamhare, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, Kamhare. Yeah.
My name is Leonard Filicetta.
Filicetta. And I've learned from you that you were actually born in Greci.
I was.
What year was that?
May 24th, 1923.
And how old were you when you came to the United States?
I was not quite 7.
So I guess if you were not quite 7, you probably don't have that many memories, but do you have any of the place where you lived with your parents or of the...
My mother and I lived with her mother and father.
What was her name, by the way?
My mother's name was Rose DiCera.
DiCera, or pronounce it for me again.
DiCera. Diceria.
Please say your name for the camera, Libby.
Libby Pucci.
And because we're going to be showing this to all the people that we know living in Greci today, and because you are one of the descendants of people from Greci living in Canton who speak the language, could you say something directly into the camera in Albanian to the people in Greci? Greetings.
I shumë me to be here today. Sada, Magita Ginga, all the cuisines, and finally got to. I can't say that. I have to really, make a conversation.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
we'll do it again.
Ujam tu Magita Kujina thought. I shumë me, and I get stuck.
We'll continue.
Yeah.
What is the oldest generation that you can remember living in Greci that you're aware of? Were your grandparents living in Greci?
I believe so, yes. Because Mom and Pop came from Greci.
Your parents?
My parents came from Greci.
You sure are.
Was born in 1908.
In what year?
Wait, my dad probably came before my mother. They you know how those days,
right.
The father came first, the mother came
what
second.
What year approximately?
I would say probably in 1908.
Okay, and your father was a Pucci.
My father was Nicholas Pucci. My mother was Genovina DioGuardi.
DioGuardi.
Yeah. I just feel so happy that I can still speak the language.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of people, I think they speak a little bit different, even though that we call ourselves Geggers, G's or whatever. Because you come across them in another city or another state, and they speak completely a little bit different. The words may come out differently, but if you know the language that well, you can make out the word. What
so
they're saying.
Is it the language that you believe connects the people that are called Arbresh?
I think so. I definitely think so. Mm-hmm.
And when you were growing up, did your parents have, obviously they spoke Albanian.
Yes.
Do you feel they had a strong sense of being Albanians from Italy even while they were
Yes, I believe so.
Have you and your parents or other relatives and friends ever returned to Greci to visit?
My sister and my father went back. My mother went back. My dad, I know my mother went back once. My dad went back twice. He brought my one brother, Tony, and then he brought my sister, Virginia.
Did they tell you anything about their experiences there years later, what it was like for them to return?
Well, they were happy to see their family, of course, and they're real close families. They all got along. My cousins, we all get along so well here.
And I have one final question. During the Kosovo War in 1999, did you ever have a sense of Albanians being attacked by the Serbs when NATO came in?
I'd read about it in the paper,
so you were
and I
of
felt
that.
sorry. Yeah, I felt bad. Yes, I felt bad about it.
Norman Nicholas Ross,
Ross,
which was changed from Sasso.
From Sasso.
To Ross.
If you are a Sasso, then you're one of the original families of Greci. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
Yes, my grandmother was a DioGuardi.
Do you have any memory at all
Of Greci?
As a 12-year-old?
Oh yeah, I remember it was a...
Tell me about it.
Well, it was kind of like going back in a history book. The rock houses and the people were seems very simple people, but I don't mean simple, but not concerned about all the worldly material things. And they wanted to send a girl back with my parents to marry me because I guess that was their tradition.
But it didn't happen.
No, my parents.
You were 12.
My parents didn't think it was such a good idea.
It's very funny.
But I think that was the way they arranged marriages at those times. Yeah.
Did your father speak Albanian?
Yes. Yeah, and there was a lot of terms that we used in the family. And I do remember one thing about my grandmother, even though I didn't know them very well. I think she passed away before I was very old. In Gagger, because she used to pinch me, and she'd say "Chista buco," and later I learned what that meant. That means how pretty.
Buka, yes.
And I guess that's a very, I guess that's a common thing that they did. Yeah.
Did your father have a strong sense of being an Albanian throughout the history?
He had a very strong sense of who he was and where he came from, and I think that's where we all got the work ethic, because, you know, we always used to say there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that's the way we were and are.
Hi, I'm Betsy Ross Sabade, and my grandfather was Raffaella Sasso, and my grandmother was Maria Libra DioGuardi. And we're all Albanians, and we're so happy to be here today, and it's just been such fun.
Did your parents speak Albanian at all when you were growing up?
Yes, they did. Just certain phrases.
Do you speak any?
No, I can only say nose.
Which is a
and Chista Buko.
Beautiful cheek.
Yes,
beautiful.
You're so pretty, yes.
You're so pretty.
Yes,
right.
Chista Buko.
Right.
And a few other words.
But they did speak it when you were growing up, nevertheless.
Yes, every once in a while, yes, we heard words,
right.
yes.
But you, of course, you grew up speaking English.
Yes, but you know, my father spoke quite a bit.
What did he do here?
My father was an engineering consultant for steel business. And we ended up in Mexico and in South America.
And did he have a strong sense of being Albanian at all? Do you feel?
Oh yes, very much so, yes.
Did he also speak Italian? Or
yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Did he and your mother and you ever go back to Greci at all?
I didn't, but they went back with my brother.
And did they ever talk about what their experience was there? What it was like to return?
It was wonderful to walk down the street, and everybody would welcome them so much and come on in and eat and stay with us, and yeah, they had a wonderful time. It was a wonderful experience.
Leonard Salasso.
And what are the oldest relatives that you're aware of, your descendants in Greci who were born there?
In Greci. That would be my father's father, my grandfather.
So your grandparents. Yeah. What was the name of your grandfather and your grandmother?
My grandfather was Leonardo Salasso. My grandmother was Vincenza Poscia.
Would you mind, by the way, speaking for the camera, because we're going to share this tape with people living in Greci today,
sure,
and I want them to know there are people in the diaspora who come back, who hark back many generations in Greci, who still speak the language.
Sure. Give me an idea what...
just give your greetings to Greci, say what it's like to be here today, and everything.
Sot bëqim një fest shumë e bukur. Këtë kishim më shumë gjingje këtu. Sa një gjë që gjithë një kind. Të ngrimt gjingjet ishin shumë të bukura, ishë një bukur head për gjithë.
What do you think, for most people, are Bresh people, is the defining feature that keeps them together and having the sense of identity that they do?
Well, I can speak for my family, and I think it's all heart. You know, it's just feelings for each other. Like my cousins that we came out to see this weekend, I haven't seen since 1952. But it was like we just picked up where we left off. You know, it's like we saw each other not too long ago. You know, and one of them is my age, and the last time I saw him, we were like 17 years old.
And how old are you now?
70. So it was a long time.
Exactly.
Bringing back a lot of memories. But, you know, it's like I said, it's like we never left each other. You just pick up where we left off back then.
Is the language a strong factor in the feeling of, you know, identity and unity, or is it something beyond that?
No, I think it's something more than that. I think it's just the family, the heart of the family. My grandparents were very close. What do you say? They weren't people that showed their feelings, but you knew it was there. You always had a warm feeling when you went home because, you know, my grandparents were there, my mother was there. And I think that's what kind of carries over, you know. These people now, like I said, it's been 50 years since I saw them last.
You're still connected.
But it's like we're still connected. I mean, I walked into this house, sat down like I never left.
During the Kosovo War, were you know, when the NATO bombing happened against Milosevic in the Serbian army. Were you aware that Albanians were dying and that you were connected to the Kosovar Albanians in any way?
Yeah, I was aware of it, and I met some. I met some of the refugees. A lady in Briarcliff put a couple up, I think a family of them. And I made a special trip there to introduce myself, and I spoke to them in Albanian, but they didn't understand too many of the words.
Because of the difference again. But they must have been really appreciative, though, that you reached out.
Well, the lady was, that I stopped in, and, she didn't know that people like myself existed in the area.
Exactly.
So I think she was impressed.
And I think a lot of Albanians don't know, they certainly don't know that there's this whole group of Albanians from Greci, primarily in Canton, living today, and that many of us have come from other parts of the country to join them. So I think this is very exciting.
DioGuardis are here. DioGuardis. Raise your hand if you have a DioGuardi in your family. Okay. Raise your hand if you have a Rex in your family. Raise your hand if you got a Poochie in the family. There's two of us. How about Cozy? Any Cozies here? I know I got a Cozy again. Tiziana. We got them all. Boscia. Salazzo. Sasso. Garibaldi. Huh? Who's the old one? All right, take a seat, everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, now this is Nettie. Your last name is Rex, right?
I was a Rex.
It was a Rex.
And I married
Orlando.
Orlando.
I see, but going back in the family, you know the DioGuardi name? Any DioGuardis in the family?
Her mother is DioGuardi.
Your mother was You're our cousin.
Yes.
I'm Joe. This is my sister Angel and my brother Richard.
So nice to meet you. I know very few words, but Ishtibuku. That's what she thinks. She is so pretty.
Si Vemi, Veminita.
Vietnamese.
That's important.
What else do you want to know?
Well,
We get them.
did you? when I used to go into my grandmother and she didn't want us to hear what they were saying, she'd say, "Mostoi mesgay."
Yes.
Yes. And when she wanted me to get out of the way, she would eek.
Wait a minute.
Ikate, get out of here.
Is this your mother?
Terrific. Terrific. Well, we have certainly found our cousins here, our blood. And as they said in Albanian, my father used to say when he met Albanians he didn't know, Jaku Shprishu, that we found our lost blood.
About George Kastriatis, Skenderbeg, the great Albanian hero.
Yeah.
Tell me what you learned.
Well, I can't tell you right offhand, but Bob showed me a lot of things in the book, you know. So he'd know more about that than I would know.
And you know that, you probably heard, I believe, that Greci is the only Albanian